She damaged the Korean Mafia CEO's luxury car. As payment, she became his maid. And then she made him fall in love. The shopping cart hit the car at exactly 2:47 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, and the sound it made, that long, slow, metallic shriek against a door panel that probably cost more than most people's houses, was the kind of sound that stops time. Juliet Adeyemi heard it before she fully understood what had happened. She had let go of the cart for 3 seconds. 3 seconds to reach into her bag for her phone because her mother was calling from Lagos, and she always answered when her mother called. 3 seconds was all it took for the slope of the car park to send the cart rolling sideways with the quiet, unhurried cruelty of something that did not care about consequences. The scratch ran from the rear door handle all the way to the tail light of a matte black vehicle that had been parked so perfectly, so deliberately, so very precisely between the lines that it looked like someone had measured the distance with a ruler. A vehicle she would later find out was a limited edition Bugatti La Voiture Noire, one of only 10 in the world, worth $9 million. $9 million. Juliet stood in the Hanamdong underground car park with her phone still in her hand, her mother's voice still coming through the speaker asking why she had gone quiet, and stared at the scratch the way a person stares at something their brain has decided it will not fully process until they have no choice. She had a choice for approximately 40 seconds. And then the elevator opened. Welcome to this channel, where love stories are told the way they deserve to be, with fire, with pain, with culture, and with truth. Today's story is called She Damaged the Korean Mafia CEO's Luxury Car, and then became his maid, and then made him fall in love. And I promise you, if you are not buckled in right now, you need to be. Stay with me. The man who stepped out of the elevator was tall in the way that announces itself before the rest of him does. Black coat, dark trousers. The kind of stillness in his body that did not come from calm but from the particular discipline of someone who had learned very early that controlled men were more frightening than loud ones. His face was sharp, angular jaw, cold dark eyes that moved across the car park with the automatic precision of a man who spent his life reading rooms for exits and threats, and when those eyes landed on the scratch on his car door, the rest of him went completely, absolutely, dangerously still. Behind him, 2 men in dark suits stopped walking. Juliet's mother was still talking. She ended the call. "That's my car," he said. His Korean was low and even. Not a question. "I know." Juliet's English came out steadier than she felt, which she was grateful for. "It was an accident. The cart slipped. I'm sorry." He looked at her, then at the scratch, then back at her with the expression of a man taking an inventory of something he intended to collect in full. "Do you know what this car costs?" "I'm going to say it's expensive. $9 million. The car park was very quiet. "I will pay for the damage," Juliet said, because what else was there to say? Because her mother had raised her to stand up straight when things went wrong, because running was not an option she was willing to take even though every nerve in her body was considering it. "I don't have $9 million. But I will pay for the damage." Something shifted in his expression. Not warmth. Not softness. Something more like interest, the cold, calculating interest of a man who had just heard something that aligned with a particular kind of thinking. He reached into his coat, produced a card, and held it out between 2 fingers. "My office. Tomorrow morning. 9 o'clock. He looked at the scratch one more time, then at her. "Don't be late." He walked around the car, got in, and drove away. Juliet stood holding his card in the underground car park for a full minute after the sound of the engine had disappeared. The card read, Kang Si1. Chairman. Kong Corporation. She Googled him on the walk home. What she found was the clean, surface version, the legitimate version. Kong Corporation, Seoul's 4th largest conglomerate. Real estate, luxury goods, private security, hospitality. Kang Si1, 36, youngest chairman in the company's history, known for being ruthless in negotiations and impeccable in results. Photos of him at galas, at corporate events, always in the same dark suits, always with the same controlled expression, never with anyone who looked like a friend. What the internet did not tell her, what you only learned if you had been in Seoul long enough to know who spoke in whispers and why, was that Kong Corporation's legitimate surface covered something older and much less visible. That Kang Si1 had inherited not just a company but a network. That his father before him had built something that operated in the spaces between laws. that the men who walked behind him were not just assistants. Juliet did not know any of this when she walked into his office building the next morning at 8:55, wearing her best blazer and carrying every document that proved who she was and what she was worth. She found out later. By then, it was already too late to matter. Kang Si-won's office occupied the entire 54th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows, the whole of Seoul spread below like something he owned, which, she would later understand, was not entirely inaccurate. His desk was large and bare. He was already seated when she walked in. He did not look up immediately, which she recognized as deliberate and refused to perform anxiety for. When he did look up, he said, "Sit down." She sat, spine straight, hands in her lap. "The repair estimate for the door panel is $480,000, he said. "The paint is custom mixed. The panel is handcrafted. It will take 3 months. Juliet absorbed this. "I can set up a payment plan. I have a stable income. I'm a music teacher at Hannam International School. I can provide. I don't need a payment plan," he said. "I need a maid." She blinked. "My household staff resigned last month. All of them. Collectively." Something crossed his face, not embarrassment, nothing so human, but perhaps the faint acknowledgement of an inconvenience. "I have been unable to find suitable replacements. You will work in my household for 1 year. The debt will be considered settled. You want me to be your maid? For 1 year. I have a job. Keep it. Your responsibilities in my household are mornings, evenings, and weekends. The schedule is manageable." Juliet looked at him for a long moment. "Why would your entire household staff resign at the same time?" The faintest pause. "That's not relevant. It's relevant to whether I'm walking into a situation I need to understand." Something shifted in his eyes, that same cold interest from the car park, recalibrated. "You're in a situation you already can't afford to walk away from. The question of whether you understand it fully is a luxury." He was not wrong. She knew it. He knew she knew it. She signed the contract that afternoon. The household staff had resigned, she discovered on her first morning at the Hannam-dong penthouse, because Kang Si-won was exactly as difficult to work for as every single one of his former employees had presumably decided was not worth the salary. He was precise to the point of inflexibility. He noticed everything: a cup placed 3 inches from where it should have been, a window left with a streak in the upper corner, a wrinkle in a bed sheet that would have been invisible to any normal human eye. He communicated his dissatisfaction not by raising his voice, but by going silent in a particular way, a temperature-drop silence that was somehow worse than shouting. Juliet met every single one of his standards and then exceeded them. Not because she was submissive, but because she was a woman from Lagos who had been raised by a mother who said if something is worth doing, it is worth doing so well that no one can find a single thing to say. She cleaned his kitchen until it reflected light. She organized his schedule with a precision that made his secretary Gia blink twice when she called to confirm appointments. She made his morning coffee black, no sugar, specific temperature, and set it on the desk at exactly the time he appeared in the kitchen every morning, which she had clocked to the minute by the 3rd day. He never said thank you. She did not wait for it. What she did not expect was the piano. It was in a room she had been told was a storage room by the housekeeper's notes left by whoever had lasted longest in this position. The door was unlocked. She opened it on her 4th morning looking for a mop and found instead a Steinway Model D Concert Grand, black, absolutely perfect, sitting in a room that had clearly been designed for nothing else: high ceilings, acoustic paneling on 2 walls, large windows facing the Han River. The piano had a thin layer of dust on the keys, the particular dust of something that had not been played in a long time, but had not been forgotten, because the rest of the room was spotless. She should have closed the door. She had work to do. She sat down instead. Juliet Adeyemi had been playing piano since she was 7 years old, taught first by her grandmother on a battered upright in Ibadan, then self-taught through years of YouTube tutorials and borrowed sheet music and practice on keyboards she could barely afford. She had never touched a Steinway Model D in her life. She touched the first key and felt the difference immediately: the response, the depth, the warmth of a truly extraordinary instrument answering a player who knew how to ask. She played for 40 minutes. She forgot entirely where she was. "What are you doing in this room?" The voice came from the doorway. She spun on the bench. Kang Si-won stood in the door frame in his white shirt and dark trousers, jacket off, tie slightly loosened in the way she had come to understand meant he had been working since before she arrived, which was before 5 a.m. His expression was unreadable, but the quality of his stillness was different from usual. He had been standing there for more than 40 minutes. She understood this and did not know what to do with it. The door was unlocked, she said. I'm sorry. I'll finish the hallway. She stood to leave. Sit down, he said. She sat. Play something else, he said. She looked at him. He looked back at her with that controlled, unreadable expression, and she thought, for the first time, that somewhere underneath the ice was a person who had been very still for a very long time and had just heard something move. She played. He listened from the doorway. He never came into the room. When she finished, he was gone, and she sat alone in the quiet of the piano room for a moment before she remembered she still had a hallway to clean. That was the beginning of the first crack. If you are watching this and you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, please do that right now. Hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications because this story is about to escalate in ways you are not prepared for. Now, back to Juliet. The brother arrived on a Friday afternoon 3 weeks after Juliet started. Kang Jae-min was everything his older brother was not, which was to say he was warm, openly expressive, devastatingly charming, and apparently constitutionally incapable of walking into a room without making every person in it aware that he had arrived. He was 29, 7 years younger than Siwon, with the same angular features but arranged into an easier, more accessible version of the same face, like the same painting done by a different artist who believed in smiling. He walked into the penthouse kitchen at 3 in the afternoon, stopped when he saw Juliet arranging his brother's weekly grocery delivery, and said in perfect English, "Well, my brother's taste has finally improved." "I'm the maid," Juliet said flatly. Jaemin pulled out a kitchen stool and sat on it with the easy comfort of someone who had done this 1,000 times. "I know what you are. I also know he makes you play piano for him in the mornings now." She paused in the middle of putting away vegetables. "He told you that?" "He didn't tell me anything. Siwon doesn't tell anyone anything. I have sources." He grinned. He had a spectacular grin, the kind that arrived completely and without reservation. "I'm Jaemin. You're Juliet. You scratched his car and now you live here." "I don't live here. You're here 12 hours a day." "Same thing." He reached across the counter and took an apple from the bowl she had just arranged, bit into it without asking. "He hasn't made anyone play the piano since our mother died. For years. That piano has been locked in that room, and I was not allowed to so much as mention it." Juliet stood very still with a bag of onions in her hand. "The room was unlocked," she said carefully. Jaemin looked at her with something that was no longer entirely casual. "No," he said. "It wasn't." He unlocked it. The silence in the kitchen was different after that. Here was the thing about Kang Jae-min that Juliet understood within the first 2 weeks of knowing him. He was not playing. The charm was real, the warmth was real, the grin was real. But underneath all of it was a man who had watched his older brother go cold and quiet and completely closed after their mother's death and had spent 4 years trying every possible entry point and finding them all locked. And then Juliet had walked in, had been pushed in by a shopping cart and bad timing, and something had unlocked that hadn't unlocked in 4 years, and Jaemin was paying very close attention to all of it. The problem was that Jaemin was also paying close attention to Juliet herself. And what started as protective interest began, by the end of the first month, to look like something else entirely. He started showing up at the penthouse more. Bringing her lunch from the Nigerian restaurant in Itaewon he had researched specifically because she mentioned missing egusi soup once in passing. Staying in the kitchen to talk while she worked, and she was aware this was technically her workplace, and he was technically her employer's family, and she should have been more professional about it. But Jaemin had a way of talking that made professional distance feel like an active effort rather than a default state, and Juliet was already exhausted from keeping her defenses up around Siwon. Siwon noticed. She knew he noticed because the temperature in the penthouse dropped approximately 3 degrees every time Jaemin was there when he came home, and because he started finding reasons to be in whatever room she was in when his brother was also there. And because one evening he dismissed Jaemin from a conversation with a single look that Jaemin received and ignored completely. "Your brother is looking at you like he wants to fire you," Jaemin told her one evening in the kitchen. "He can't fire me," she said. "We have a contract." Jamin's smile did something complicated. Right, he said. The contract. What nobody had told Juliet, what she had to piece together from overheard conversations and things that Gia let slip, and the particular way certain visitors were handled when they came to the penthouse, was the fuller picture of what Kang Siwon was. The company was real. The business was real. But the network underneath it, the favors, the territories, the men who appeared and disappeared, the calls that happened at 2 a.m. and were never discussed, that was the older inheritance. The one he had not chosen but had accepted, because the alternative was allowing it to exist without someone to control it, and Kang Siwon had decided at 22 years old that a controlled darkness was safer than an uncontrolled one. It was Gia who told her. Not all of it. Enough. You should be careful, Gia said one afternoon when they were alone in the kitchen. Gia was Korean, precise, intensely loyal to Siwon in the particular way of someone who had seen enough to choose loyalty consciously rather than by default. Not because he would hurt you. He wouldn't. But because the people who want to hurt him will look for the things that matter to him. I'm his maid, Juliet said. Gia looked at her with the specific expression of a woman who had heard this exact sentence before and found it exactly as unconvincing the second time. Yes, she said. Of course. Then came Yoon Seo-yeon. If Shin Dae-ho from Juliet's previous acquaintance in Seoul had been unpleasant, Yoon Seo-yeon was unpleasant refined to an art form. She was 28, the daughter of a Gangnam family with deep social connections and deeper ambitions. A classically trained pianist who had studied at the Paris Conservatoire and returned to Seoul trailing reputation and the specific brand of confidence that came from years of being the most accomplished person in every room she entered. She was beautiful, angular and precise, dark hair always immaculately arranged, clothing that looked effortless in the way that only extraordinary expense achieves. She had been, as Juliet gathered from the social geography of the Kang household, pursuing Kang Siwon for approximately 2 years. Not loudly. Not obviously. In the careful, patient way of someone who understood that a man like Siwon did not respond to pursuit and so had arranged herself instead to be repeatedly and naturally present in his orbit. Seo-yeon arrived at the penthouse for a dinner that Juliet was serving on a Saturday evening, saw Juliet, and smiled the kind of smile that had nothing to do with being pleased. Oh, she said, in Korean to Siwon. This is the one who scratched your car. Juliet, Siwon said. Miss Yoon's glass needs refreshing. Juliet refreshed the glass. She felt Seo-yeon's eyes on her the entire time. After dinner, in the kitchen, Seo-yeon appeared in the doorway. She had a particular way of standing in doorways framed, composed, as if she was always slightly aware of how she looked, and she looked at Juliet with the frank assessment of a woman taking a measurement. You play piano, she said. A little, Juliet said. Siwon let you play his mother's piano. Juliet continued washing the crystal glasses. I happened upon the room. He hasn't let anyone near that room in 4 years. Seo-yeon's voice was pleasant. Careful. Not even me. I studied at the Paris Conservatoire. I have performed at Carnegie Hall. He has never once asked me to play that piano. She paused. I find that interesting, don't you? Juliet set down the glass. Turned to face her. What are you trying to tell me, Miss Yoon? Something shifted in Seo-yeon's expression, a flicker of genuine surprise at being met so directly. Then the pleasantness returned, harder underneath. I'm telling you to understand your position here. You scratched a car. You're working off a debt. This household and everything in it, including the piano room, is not yours. Don't get confused about that. I'm not confused about anything, Juliet said calmly. Is there something else you need? Seo-yeon looked at her for one long moment, then turned and left. Juliet stood in the kitchen alone and acknowledged, quietly and honestly, that she had a problem. Not the problem Seo-yeon thought she had. A different one. The problem of a man who unlocked a piano room he had kept sealed for 4 years. The problem of a man who sat in a doorway and listened to her play with an expression she was not supposed to have noticed, but had noticed completely. The problem of a growing, inconvenient, absolutely impractical awareness that underneath the ice and the distance and the Mafia network and the $9 million car, Kang Siwon was a person. And she was becoming unable to not see him. That, she thought, was a significant problem. The piano competition announcement came from Gia, who delivered it to Juliet on a Monday morning with the specific efficiency of someone relaying a command that had already been decided. Master Ellie is holding a disciple selection competition next month, Jia said. Master Ellie, full name Park Eun-ji, was the most celebrated pianist in South Korea, a former international competition winner who now taught privately and accepted one new disciple every 3 years. The competition was by invitation only. Mr. Kang has arranged an invitation for you. Juliet looked up from the kitchen counter. I'm sorry. He submitted your name. Master Ellie has accepted the application. Jia placed a folder on the counter. The competition is in 4 weeks. The details are in here. He submitted my name for a piano competition. Yes, without asking me. Jia's expression remained perfectly neutral. Mr. Kang generally does not ask. He arranges. She paused at the kitchen door. I would recommend accepting. Master Ellie does not extend invitations for rearrangement. Juliet stood with the folder in her hands and felt something she had been trying not to feel for 3 weeks arrange itself into undeniable shape. She found him in his study that evening, which she was technically not supposed to enter without being summoned. She knocked once and opened the door. He looked up. You submitted my name to Master Ellie's competition, she said. Yes. Without asking me. You would have said no. You don't know that. You would have said it was inappropriate given your position here. His voice was even. Matter of fact. You're wrong about that. Your position here is what I say it is. My position here is Maid, she said. That's what the contract says. Something shifted in his eyes. That same complex, unreadable shift she had been cataloging for weeks without fully understanding what it was building toward. The contract says you work off a debt. It doesn't say anything about what else you are. The study was quiet. The Seoul skyline was visible through the window behind him, all light and movement, and the enormous indifference of a city that didn't care what was happening in this room. Why? She asked. The word came out stripped of everything except the honest question. He looked at her for a long moment. You play like someone who has something to say. Not everyone with technique has something to say. Most people with your level of training have technique and nothing else. He looked back at his desk. Master Ellie will hear it. Enter the competition. Juliet left the study. She stood in the hallway for a full minute. Then she opened the folder and started reading. Drop a comment right now and let me know, are you Team C1 or Team Jaemin? Because trust me, it is about to get very complicated. And please like this video if you are still here. It genuinely helps this channel. Now, the competition. Yoon Seo-yeon was also in the competition. Juliet found this out the morning of the first preliminary round from Jaemin, who appeared at the competition venue lobby with coffee and the expression of someone delivering both good and bad news. She's been trying to get Master Ellie's attention for 2 years, he said, handing Juliet the coffee. This is her 3rd application. She got in this time because, well, because of who her family is. He paused. She also knows you're here because my brother arranged it. She's not going to be gentle. I'm not here to be handled gently, Juliet said. Jaemin looked at her with that warm, complicated gaze he had been giving her increasingly often over the past weeks. He reached out and adjusted the shoulder of her blazer, a small, entirely unnecessary gesture that was also an excuse to touch her, and said quietly, You're the best player in this building. I've heard you. Play like you know that. From across the lobby, Siwon was watching. He was supposed to be in a meeting. He was not in a meeting. He was standing 30 feet away with Jia beside him, in his dark suit, watching Jaemin's hand on Juliet's shoulder with an expression that could have cut glass. Juliet noticed him over Jaemin's shoulder. She held his gaze for a moment, just a moment, and something passed between them that had no good name yet, but was no longer nothing. She went in and played. She played Chopin first. Then an original composition she had been building in her head for 3 years and finally finished on C1 Steinway, a piece that started like Legos at dawn, warm and layered and alive, and moved into something cooler and more structured. 2 musical worlds reaching toward each other in the middle and finding something neither had expected. Master Ellie, a small, silver-haired woman with eyes like precision instruments, sat completely still through the entire performance and then was quiet for a long moment after. What is the name of the second piece? She asked. Juliet thought of the piano room. The unlocked door. The man who listened without coming in. Threshold, she said. Master Ellie looked at her for a long moment. Come back for the final round. In the corridor outside, Seo-yeon was waiting. She had played before Juliet, technically perfect, emotionally cold in the specific way of someone who had spent so long on precision that they had forgotten what the precision was supposed to serve. She heard the result from the assistant before Juliet was fully out of the performance hall, and the pleasantness she had been performing dropped completely. You think because you have his protection you can walk in here and... I think I played well, Juliet said. That's all. He's using you, Seo-yun said. The words came fast and sharp, and they landed the way they were designed to. You're a novelty. An interesting project. He likes that you're different, that you play music, that you don't look at him the way everyone else does. But when the contract ends and the novelty wears off, you'll be a music teacher again and I'll still be here. I've been here. I'll always be here. Juliet looked at her without expression. Then you don't have anything to worry about. She walked away. Her hands were shaking very slightly. She put them in her pockets so no one could see. Siwon was waiting by the car. He had not left. He had waited in the lobby through 2 other performers' sets, and he was standing by the car when she came out, and when she saw him, the controlled face, the dark suit, the sole afternoon light making everything look sharper than it was. Something in her chest did something she was not prepared for. Master Ellie invited me to the final round, she said. I know, he said. Jia told me. You were inside? For some of it. She looked at him. Did you hear the second piece? A pause. Something moved across his face, just briefly, just slightly, the way light moves across water. Yes, that's your mother's piano in that room, she said. Not accusing. Just saying. Yes, you unlocked the door. He said nothing, which was also an answer. She got in the car. He got in beside her. They drove back to Hanamdong in a silence that was not empty at all. That night, very late, she heard him in the piano room. She had been awake. She had been lying awake in the maid's quarters, trying to have a rational conversation with herself about things that were not rational, and she heard the piano. One piece. She recognized it from the recordings she had looked up, Sati, Gymnopedie number 1, slow and searching and full of something that had nowhere to go. She did not get up. She lay in the dark and listened until it stopped, and then there was silence, and she pressed her hand against her chest where her heart was doing something she was going to have to stop ignoring. This story is not slowing down. Make sure you are subscribed so you never miss what comes next on this channel. Like this video right now if you are feeling this story, because there is a lot more coming. The business conflict arrived in the 4th week of Juliet's 2nd month, like everything dangerous in Siwon's world arrived, suddenly, completely, without the courtesy of warning. Juliet was in the living room recataloguing Siwon's book collection. He had a system. She had learned it. She was maintaining it, when she heard voices from his study that were too loud to ignore even through a closed door. She recognized Siwon's voice, controlled as always, but carrying a temperature that meant something was wrong. The second voice was unfamiliar, older, male, contemptuous in a specific way. She found out from Jia the next morning. Cho Industries had been attempting to acquire one of Kong Corporation's subsidiary holdings, a hospitality chain that controlled access to 3 major Seoul development zones. The Cho family patriarch, Cho Byung-jun, was a 72-year-old man with deep government connections and the specific boldness of someone who had operated for 50 years without being checked. He had made an offer. Siwon had declined. Cho Byung-jun had then gone to the board members of the subsidiary directly, attempting to orchestrate a forced sale by accumulating enough board votes to remove Kong Corporation's controlling interest. How serious is it? Juliet asked. Jia looked at her with the expression of someone deciding how much to say. Serious enough that he hasn't slept in 3 days. She found him in the kitchen at 4 in the morning on the 4th day, which was unusual because Siwon's discipline was architectural. He maintained his routines even under pressure, and 4 a.m. kitchen appearances were not part of them. He was standing at the counter in a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, staring at a glass of water like it had said something to him. He looked up when she came in. She was in her sleep clothes. She had taken to staying at the penthouse several nights a week when things ran late, the maid's quarters becoming increasingly normal as a place to sleep. She had not considered how she looked until she saw him look at her. Go back to sleep, he said. I heard you come in, she said. It was 3-something in the morning. He had been in meetings since the previous afternoon. She went to the coffee machine, made 2 cups the right way, his way, and put one in front of him on the counter. She stood on the other side of the island and drank hers and did not demand conversation. After a long moment, he said, Cho Byung-jun is trying to take something that keeps 300 people employed. Not because he needs it. Because he can. Can he? Juliet asked. He thinks so. Do you think so? He looked at her. No. Then you already know what you're going to do. The execution is complicated. Most things worth doing are. He was quiet for a moment. Then, very quietly, in a different register than anything she had heard from him before, do you know how long it's been since someone sat in this kitchen at 4 in the morning and just was here? She held his gaze. How long? For years, he said. His voice was steady. His eyes were not entirely steady. For years. Since his mother. Juliet set down her coffee cup. The kitchen was very still. The city outside was dark and indifferent and alive. I'm here, she said. Simply. Without performance. Just the fact of it. He looked at her for a long, complex, weighted moment. Then he picked up his coffee. Go back to sleep, Juliet. She went. But at the doorway she stopped and turned back. Siwon. He looked up. You're going to win, she said. You know you are. Stop standing in the kitchen at 4 in the morning pretending otherwise. Something happened on his face that she would spend a long time thinking about afterward. Not quite a smile, nothing so straightforward. Something that lived in the neighborhood of a smile and had not found its way to the surface in a very long time. Go to sleep, he said again. But different this time. She went. The problem with Jaemin was that he was paying attention to all of this and drawing the correct conclusions and deciding to act on them. He appeared on a Saturday afternoon when Siwon was in Busan for a meeting, which Jaemin definitely knew because Jaemin knew Siwon's schedule better than most of his staff, and he helped Juliet with the marketing grocery run which she had not asked for help with. And they walked back through Hanamdong in the late afternoon light with grocery bags and easy conversation, and it was comfortable in the specific way that comfort becomes dangerous. At the penthouse elevator, Jaemin set down the bags. He turned to look at her with the direct warmth that was his version of his brother's controlled focus, different instrument, same intensity. Juliet, he said. Jaemin, she said, because his name in that register meant something was coming. I know you're aware of what I feel, he said. No charm. No grin. Just direct. I'm not going to perform casual about it. I like you. I've liked you since the third morning I came to this apartment and you looked at me like I was a mild inconvenience and handed me coffee anyway. He paused. I want to take you to dinner. Not here. Not because of him. Just dinner. Me. You. Juliet stood with a grocery bag in each hand in front of the elevator and looked at Kang Jaemin, who was kind and warm and openly wonderful, and felt the particular ache of someone who had already made a decision they hadn't admitted to yet. Jaemin. You don't have to answer now, he said quickly, the grin coming back, softer. I'm patient. I just needed to say it. The elevator doors opened. Siwon stepped out. He had come back early. He looked at Jaemin, then at Juliet, then at the space between them with the specific quality of attention he gave to things he was cataloging as threats. His jaw tightened. Just once. Brother, Jaemin said easily. Early flight? Meeting ended, Siwon said. He looked at Juliet. Go inside. I'm not a dog, she said quietly. Something flashed in his eyes. I know. Please go inside. The please was new. She went inside. Behind her she could hear the brothers' voices low, controlled, the specific register of two men who knew each other too well to shout. She could not hear the words. She went to the kitchen and stood at the counter and tried to have a clear thought. Jaemin left 20 minutes later. When Siwon came in, he walked past the kitchen without looking at her. She heard his study door close. She gave it 10 minutes. Then she knocked. Come in. She opened the door. He was at his desk, but not working. His hands were on the surface, but the papers in front of him were unread. Are you angry? She asked. No. Flat. You're lying. He looked up. Yes, he said. I am. The room held the admission between them. At him or at me? She asked. At the situation. He stood. Moved to the window. Jaemin he's not uncomplicated. He means everything he says. That's not a small thing. He looked at the city. He's also my brother and you are in my house and there are rules about what that means. Rules you made, she said. Rules that exist. Siwon. She said his name the way she had learned to say it, without title, without the deference the household used, the way she had started doing without deciding to. He turned. What do you want? The question was very simple. He looked at her for a long moment with the full weight of a man who had spent 4 years building walls around every answer to exactly this kind of question. That, he said quietly, is a conversation for when your contract ends. The contract ends in 8 months. I know. That's a long time. Yes. Something in his voice that wasn't controlled at all. It is. She left. She went to the piano room. She played for an hour with the door open. He did not appear in the doorway, but she heard him in the hallway. She played the piece called Threshold again, slower this time. And the music moved through the apartment and she knew he was listening, and she played every single thing she did not have words for yet into the keys of his mother's piano and let it exist in the air between them. The Cho Industries conflict reached its peak 10 days later. Siwon moved precisely and without mercy. He had spent 3 weeks quietly purchasing shares in Cho Industries' most vulnerable subsidiary through a network of shell companies that could not be traced back to him until they already owned enough to matter. He assembled a counter-coalition of board members at his own subsidiary with the particular efficiency of a man who had been doing this since he was 22, some through negotiation, some through the older methods, none of which Juliet would ever have the specific details of. When Cho Byung-joon arrived at what he believed was a board meeting to finalize his acquisition, he found instead a letter from his own subsidiary's investors, supported by Kong Corporation's new stake in Cho Industries, recommending a strategic reassessment of the Kang Corporation acquisition attempt. In plain language, Siwon had walked into Cho Byung-joon's house through a side door the old man hadn't known existed and rearranged everything while the patriarch was looking the wrong way. Cho Byung-joon called Siwon personally. The call lasted 6 minutes. The content of it was not recorded, but Jia reported afterward that she had heard Siwon's end, and that at one point he had said, in a voice she had never heard from him before, not cold, not controlled, just absolute. Your orders are final when you give them to people who answer to you. I don't answer to you. No one in this building does. Touch my subsidiary again, and I'll own your entire company by March. The acquisition attempt ended. 300 employees kept their jobs. Juliet found out from Jia and spent approximately 1 minute processing it before she found Siwon in the kitchen making coffee badly. He had somehow reverted to his old method. She had noticed this happened when he was pleased. And she took the coffee out of his hands, remade it correctly, and handed it back without comment. He took the cup. Looked at her. You heard. Jia. Yes. It's handled. I know. She leaned against the counter. Looked at him. You didn't sleep. You've been running this since the first week. You've been exhausted. I'm fine. Siwon. He looked at her. Sit down, she said. Drink your coffee. You won. Sit down. He sat. At the kitchen island. In his dark suit at 11 in the morning with his coffee. And she sat across from him, and they drank their coffee and did not perform anything for each other, and the kitchen was warm, and the city was outside, and the contract was a fact she was increasingly aware of as a wall she was building toward. And then Seo-yeon went nuclear. The photos appeared on 3 Seoul social media platforms simultaneously on a Wednesday morning. Juliet, photographed at multiple locations around the city, at a convenience store near the penthouse, at the competition venue, at a restaurant where she had eaten with Jaemin. But the photos were framed and captioned in a specific way that told a story of a woman using the Kang family for social advancement, a foreign maid angling for a position she had not earned, exploiting a grief-softened CEO who didn't know he was being manipulated. One of the photos was of her and Jaemin outside the restaurant, clearly a paparazzi shot from a distance. The caption read, "The Kang CEO's maid and his brother. How many Kang men is she working through?" By noon it had 30,000 engagements. Juliet found out when Gina, a colleague from Hannam International School, sent her a screenshot with 3 question marks. She sat in the staff room during her prep period and read the posts 3 times, the careful, specific architecture of the damage clear to her. This was not impulsive. This was constructed. This was someone who had access to information about her movements and had been collecting it. She knew who it was. She had no proof. Siwon called at 12:15. "I've seen it," she said before he could speak. "I know." His voice was controlled. The specific controlled quality of barely. "Where are you?" "School." "I'm at work." "Jia is on her way." "Don't talk to anyone, don't post anything. Come directly to the penthouse after school." C1I. Juliet. His voice dropped. I'm handling it. Trust me. She absorbed the words. The specific weight of them from a man who did not ask for trust and did not offer it lightly. Okay, she said. She hung up. She sat in the staff room for 1 minute. Then she stood up, straightened her blazer, and went to teach her 3 o'clock class, because whatever Kang Siwon was handling, her students still had a lesson. He had 3 investigators on the origin of the posts by the time she arrived at the penthouse. Gia met her at the elevator and briefed her in the lift. The posts had been filed from multiple devices, but the metadata from 2 of the photos showed they had been taken from a specific camera model that Seo Yun's social media profile had featured prominently 3 months ago. It was not proof. It was close. I can say it was her, Juliet said when she walked into Siwon's study and found him at his desk in the controlled fury of a man who had made a decision and was executing it. He looked up. At the final competition round, she said. She confronted me afterward. She told me I was a novelty, that you were using me, that when the contract ended I'd be nothing and she'd still be here. It wasn't she said it like someone who had already decided on a plan. Like she was explaining something she intended to make true. She paused. I didn't tell you because I didn't think it would come to this. Siwon's expression went very still. The particular stillness that, she now understood, preceded decisive action. You should have told me, he said quietly. I know. She sat in this house and ate at this table and he stopped. His hands went flat on the desk. The controlled fury of a man reminding himself of the rules of his own discipline. It doesn't matter. We have what we need. The investigation took 4 days and produced a complete documented record, the camera metadata, the timestamps that matched Seo Yun's confirmed movements, communications recovered by sources Juliet did not ask the details of, and a financial record showing Seo Yun had paid a reputation management firm to amplify the posts. Siwon did not go to the press. He went directly to Seo Yun's father. Juliet did not know the details of that conversation. She knew from Gia that it lasted 40 minutes and that it was not pleasant and that Siwon had laid the full documented record on the table and made 2 things clear. The posts would be retracted and publicly corrected, and Yoon Seo-yeon would remove herself permanently from Kong Corporation's social and professional circles. In exchange, the documents would not go to a prosecutor. The posts came down by Friday morning. A correction and apology were posted by the platform accounts, not from Seo-yeon herself, but the correction was public and complete. By Monday, the story had reversed entirely. Seo-yeon did not appear in Kang Siwon's orbit again. Juliet heard about the final resolution from Gia on a Friday afternoon and sat in the piano room for a long time afterward, running her hands along the keys without pressing them. He found her there when he came home. She did not hear him this time. She was too inside her own quiet. He was simply there, in the doorway, in his dark coat, and when she looked up his face had the open quality she had only glimpsed before and had been half convinced she imagined. "Thank you," she said. "You don't need to thank me. I do." She turned on the bench to face him. "You didn't have to do any of it the way you did it. You could have," she paused. "You protected me." "Yes." Simple. Without qualification. "Why?" she asked. And it was the same question as before, in the study, weeks ago. But it meant something different now. He stepped into the room. The first time he had stepped into the room since his mother. He crossed to the piano and stood beside the bench, looking down at the keys with an expression that was not controlled at all. "Play something," he said. "Siwon, please." The word again. She turned back to the keys. She played the piece called Threshold. She played it all the way through, both sections, Lagos and Seoul, and the middle where they reached each other, and when she finished the last note and the sound dissolved into the room, he was still standing beside her, and the room was very quiet. His hand found her shoulder. Not demanding. Not taking. Just there. Warm and still and certain. "When the contract ends," he said quietly, "I'm going to tell you something. I want to tell you now. But I made a rule and I'm going to keep it." She looked up at him. His face was so close. His eyes were doing that thing that had no controlled version of itself. "The contract ends in 7 months," she said. "I know. Siwon." "Juliet. Break the rule," she said. Something gave way in his face. Something that had been held a long time. His hand moved from her shoulder to her jaw, tilting her face up, and he looked at her for one full moment, just looked, as if committing something to memory, and then he kissed her. Not consuming. Not desperate. The kiss of a controlled man who had decided, finally, on something and was being completely certain about it. Warm and deliberate and completely present, and she felt it move through her the way music moves, not just heard but felt, in the chest, in the bones. When they separated, his forehead came down to rest against hers. His eyes were closed. "I have been wanting to do that," he said, very quietly, "since you sat at this piano the first time and played like the music was something you needed to say." She laughed. Soft and real and completely without reservation. He felt it against his lips and something in his face that had been guarded for 4 years open like a window. "You unlocked the door," she said. "Yes. You knew I'd find it. I hoped you would." She leaned into him. He held her carefully, completely, the way a man holds something he has been afraid to want. Outside, Seoul glittered with its million indifferent lights. Inside the piano room, the Steinway sat in its warm light, and 2 people sat beside it who had arrived at this moment by the specific chain of catastrophes and kindnesses and quiet watching that sometimes, if you are very lucky or divinely unlucky with shopping carts, brings 2 people to exactly the same place. If you are still here, thank you. Genuinely. Drop a comment and tell me your favorite moment in this story. Was it the piano room? The kitchen at 4 in the morning? The corridor kiss? Tell me everything. Like this video, share it with someone who loves a good love story, and subscribe to this channel if you are not already here because there are more stories coming and you will not want to miss them. But the story, as it turned out, was not entirely done. Jaemin. He came to the penthouse on a Sunday morning, which he did regularly enough that it should have been unremarkable. He came in through the front door with his key. Siwon had given him a key years ago and never taken it back, and he went to the kitchen where he usually found Juliet on Sunday mornings because Sunday mornings were her most consistent shift. He found both of them. They were not performing anything. They were simply in the kitchen. Siwon in his weekend clothes for the first time Jaemin had ever seen, actual casual clothes, dark jeans, a simple shirt, and Juliet across the counter making what smelled like jollof rice at 9 in the morning. And they were talking. Quietly. Easily. The specific ease of 2 people who had stopped pretending to each other. Jaemin stood in the kitchen entrance for a moment. Siwon looked up. Their eyes met. Something passed between the brothers, something long and complex and brotherly and honest. Then Jaemin pulled out the kitchen stool and sat down and reached for an apple from the bowl and said, in English, for Juliet's benefit, "You're making jollof rice at 9 in the morning?" "I make jollof rice whenever I want," Juliet said without turning around. Jaemin looked at his brother. Took a bite of the apple. "You look different," he said simply. "Do I?" said Siwon. "Yeah." Jaemin looked at the counter, the kitchen, the rice on the stove, the easy warmth in the room that had been absent from this apartment for 4 years. "Yeah, you do." He ate breakfast with them. He teased Juliet about her rice, which she defended at length. He argued with Siwon about the business section of the newspaper. He did not mention the question he had asked Juliet in front of the elevator. He did not need to. Some things, in the end, are their own answer. 3 weeks before the final round of Master Ellie's competition, Siwon walked Juliet to the competition venue himself, not the driver, not Gia, himself. He stood outside while she went in. She played 2 pieces, Threshold, and a new one she had been writing on his mother's piano, which had no title yet but which Gia had heard through the door and told Juliet made her cry for reasons she couldn't explain. Master Ellie sat in silence for a very long moment after the second piece ended. Then she looked at Juliet with the precision instrument eyes and said, "Where did you study?" "YouTube," Juliet said honestly. "And a piano in my grandmother's house in Ibadan." Master Ellie was quiet for another moment. Then, "I accept 1 disciple every 3 years. I have been in this work for 40 years. I have had 13 disciples." She paused. "You will be the 14th. Outside, in the afternoon light, Juliet found Siwon leaning against the car with his arms crossed and his controlled expression. She stopped in front of him. "Well," he said. "I'm her 14th disciple," she said. Something happened in his face, that neighborhood of a smile, fuller this time, actually reaching his eyes. He reached out and took her hand. Just that. palm to palm, his fingers closing around hers, standing outside a competition venue in Seoul in the afternoon with people walking past and not a single thing performed or hidden. "I told you," he said. "You did," she said. "You're not going to say I was right. I'm going to let you know it for your own quiet satisfaction," she said. "That's all you're getting." He laughed. Actually laughed, short, real, the sound of something in a man who has forgotten how. It was extraordinary. She stored it. 6 months later, the contract ended. She was in the piano room on the day the Steinway and the Han River and the Seoul afternoon light that had been the backdrop to most of the truest moments of the past year. She heard him come home earlier than expected. She heard him pause outside the room. She kept playing. He came in. He sat beside her on the piano bench, the full length of him beside her, his knee against hers, his presence warm and still and certain. She finished the piece. The last note dissolved. "The contract is done," she said. "Yes," he said. She looked at him. "Now what?" He reached into his pocket and set something on the piano keys in front of her. Small. A ring, simple and precise, a single dark stone, not a diamond, something deeper, a stone the color of the Han River at night. "Juliet Adeyemi," he said. Her full name in his mouth, carefully, correctly pronounced. She had taught him in the kitchen 3 months ago, and he had not forgotten a single syllable. "You scratched my car, and you moved into my house, and you unlocked a room I had sealed, and you played music that I didn't know I was waiting to hear. You sat with me at 4 in the morning and told me I was going to win when I needed to hear it. You made my brother laugh again. You made this apartment," he paused. "You made it have a sound again." Her eyes were bright. She was not going to cry in front of Kong Siwon. She absolutely was going to cry in front of Kong Siwon. "I'm still technically owed 4 months of maid service," she managed. "I'll take a lifetime of jollof rice instead," he said. She laughed. The tears came anyway, the good kind, the relief kind, the kind that comes when something you have been careful about for a long time finally becomes something you are allowed to have. "Yes," she said. He put the ring on her finger. Then he kissed her again, not the careful first kiss of a man who had just broken a rule, but the kiss of a man who had decided and was completely certain and had nowhere else to be. Outside, Seoul glittered. In the piano room, the Steinway sat in its warm light, and the Han River moved through the city the way it always had. And Juliet Adeyemi, who had come to the city with a cart and a catastrophe and no idea at all that a $9 million scratch was the best thing that had ever happened to her, Juliet leaned into Kang Siwon and stayed. She was never the maid again. She was something better. She was the woman who had walked into the ice and made the whole thing warm. And if you need proof that fate has a sense of humor, the shopping cart was still in the Hanamdong car park when they went back to that supermarket for the first time together, 8 months after it all began. She pointed at it. He looked at it for a long moment. "Should we thank it?" she said. He took her hand. "We should leave before I have it destroyed," he said. She laughed all the way to the car. Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. You are exactly who this channel is made for. If you loved this story, and I think you did, please like this video right now, subscribe if you are not already here, and drop a comment telling me your absolute favorite moment. Was it the piano room? 4 in the morning? The ring on the keys? Tell me. Share this with someone who deserves a good love story today. I will see you in the next one. Don't go far.